All right, just so you know, we're starting to live stream, so don't say anything you don't want heard.
All right,
Heads up.
Mike. That's where I'll hit the mute button.
Yeah. All right, it's working. We're all good. All right.
Hey, Tom, Al Riley here. Can you hear me?
Hey, Alan, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
I'm
Thanks for
working.
joining us.
Yes.
How's everything?
Very good, thank you.
Good.
I was worried about the connection here.
Yeah, I know it's a new world we're in here. Yeah.
It is. Very new.
Yeah. Everything going all right with you, though?
It's going well.
Good.
Well, hello, everybody. Is my video up too?
Not yet.
Oh. See what I got to do here. There it goes.
All right. There you go.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Tom, could you help me
Yeah.
change the name that you can see on my screen? I don't know how to do that on WebEx. I'm assuming you don't see my name and you just see my email.
Right. Yeah. I don't know how you change your screen name. Let's see. It's got to be in your settings somewhere. I don't think I could do it from where I am.
Thank you.
Sure.
Michelle, I'm here.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good.
Morning, everyone. I realized I left. I still had mine on mute because Tom has his live streaming right now, so I figured let me just be on mute for a little while.
You don't say anything you don't want the public to hear.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning, Joe.
How's everyone?
Very good.
Good.
Good. Good to see all of you.
Yeah, you too.
No one's working. No one's in a tie and suit.
I have a collar today.
Me too. Yeah, I'm not in my gym clothes.
Exactly. It's not a bad thing.
Right.
And I finally got a haircut yesterday, so I was like, oh, it was like heaven.
Yeah, I actually bought one of the. Didn't do too badly. If you don't look at the back where I kind of messed up, I guess it's not too bad.
Oh boy. I don't know about baseball, Joe.
Well, it looks horrible, doesn't it?
Yep.
I don't understand it. You know, if you're making $65 million, you ought to be able to give up a little bit of it and still survive.
You would think.
It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's embarrassing. You know, it's America's game, and everybody else is able to do it except for the baseball.
Yeah.
Well, luckily they're showing all of the old games on television.
Yeah, they have been for the past 3 months. So
Yeah.
watched.
Nice to see Don Larson pitching his no-hitter in the World Series and Rivera running out and hugging him. You know,
It's going to be weird to see the Yankees.
I'm sorry.
It's going to be weird to see the Yankees lose next year. Yes, it's spoiling us with all of the Yankees winning
I know it.
games.
We won't lose any games.
Right.
I have a question. Can we make sure that everyone has on the video their name? Because I see some people that don't have their name. I'm just asking who are they? And new faces too.
Yeah, Jizu was just trying to figure that out on hers. Let's see. We have to see. I don't know exactly how to change your screen name.
So they have to do it. It's on settings.
Okay.
After going to settings, you have to you look into your own. It's the first thing that you see, whatever name you have and whatever email you have.
So I don't have that, Michelle. All I have is notes, copy meeting link, audio connection, speaker, microphone, and camera, and connect with device. In my settings, I don't have that option.
Hey, Alicia, is my mic working?
Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Tom, if I see a line through my microphone, obviously you can hear me. Is that right?
Hear you? Yes.
Okay, fine.
Yep.
Good morning, everybody.
Let's see.
Morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, let's see here. Trying to keep track of everybody that's joining.
How are we doing, Tom?
Good. It looks like we're up to 9 members. Let me just see if I can get a full list here.
If you go to participants, you can see a list of participants on the right-hand side.
Okay. Let's see. I'm in my box view, so I'm trying to look at where I would do that. I can see everybody's picture.
The bottom row, all below all the pictures, there's like a picture of a little person. It's like microphone, video, share.
Gotcha.
Then
Yeah.
if you click on that one.
Got it. All right. I think we have a quorum, Eddie. So.
All right.
You want to kick it off?
Yep. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in what I'm sure has now become the new normal for everyone in terms of how we are conducting our work throughout this country, as well as our own social connections. This is our June 16th JAG meeting, where we've got a lot of things that we have that we want to cover. So we want to start. I hope that everyone got Tom's email with all the various documents that we're gonna be diligent around sort of making sure that we cover sufficiently each one of these set of documents so that we all understand sort of what's in it, what's how it's gonna help us continue to support sort of the JAG work that New York State has. We've made our commitments around, and we're actually very excited to talk about how we're the strategic planning work, and as well as some other set of items. So what I want to so a couple of things as we get started. I want us to sort of be mindful of, as we are in meeting, that sort of mute yourself while you're not talking, and then if you want to chime in, definitely unmute yourself and jump in. But we want to make sure that as we're sort of conversing this morning, we have an opportunity to be able to hear each other. Also, as a quick reminder that
and the fire engines.
That's me. Sorry.
All right. You can't mute it then. All right.
Let me hold on. Let me close the window. I think that'll help. Sorry, I hope that helped.
All right, thank you.
Everyone, that this meeting is being live streamed. So, so this is obviously for the general public. Also has the ability to observe this JAG meeting. So I want to start first by asking for any commentary regarding the agenda items that we're going to cover today. We're going to spend some time doing a roundtable discussion around our current reality, staff updates around the federal funding, and as well as the state ed liaison role. We're going to spend some time the Youth Justice Institute. Giza has joined us to provide us a nice, great overview around what the YJI is doing, and we're also going to discuss and pursue a motion for a proposal regarding the YJI, and then we're going to spend a good chunk of time talking through the strategic planning process that the small committee of us have taken on the tasks on behalf of everyone here to at least generate sort of an outline of what we think the process should be and the ways in which we're going to engage everyone. And then we're gonna wrap it up, and my intention is we are going to wrap up by 1 o'clock, if not earlier. So that being said, I want to open it up in terms of if there are any comments regarding the minutes from our March meeting. Nope. All right. So could I get a motion to approve the minutes from our March meeting?
So moved.
Okay. I heard two different voices, and I'm gonna. So, all right. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye or yes.
Aye.
Any noes? Abstentions? All right. So, first item on the agenda, which is our roundtable discussion. So all of you have, one of the things that we endeavored from our March meeting was to gather a document that has a representation of the range of experiences that are represented here on the JAG. I think it's one of the first times, at least in the last 10 years that I've been participating on the JAG, that we've had a document like this. And it was truly humbling to read sort of the range of experiences that folks are bringing to the table. And most importantly, sort of what value added it's going to bring in terms of how we actually engage in the work that we get to do as a JAG. And as a way for us to sort of converse around these different set of experiences and background that everyone's bringing to the table, we thought a way to kind of to really tap into all these different experiences is really to bring it to bear to some of the current events that are occurring across the U.S., in particular in New York, that has various levels of impact in terms of our work. Obviously, COVID-19, in terms of how we are responding and contending with the pandemic that's happening across the world, the racial and ethnic disparities that have once again surfaced in a manner that has, and I'll speak for myself, has sort of rocked and saddened me in terms of sort of the reality of how pervasive these types of disparities continue throughout this country. Also, it's also brought to light conversations around our policing work, right? And the ways in which we're also tapping into our various community partners that are also involved in how do we to try to mitigate some of these patterns of disparities across the country. And then lastly, the other piece that we want to sort of that's also been surfaced is the nature of how trauma and the nature of what healing work has to transpire to really contend with the nature of how this isolation is affecting us in terms of our own social development, and as well as the manner in which the healing that needs to occur as we address the pervasive nature of some of these disparities that are happening across the country. And so we wanted to sort of have to open up what we're calling sort of a roundtable discussion as a community, as a JAG community that brings different perspectives and has different roles throughout the state in the work that we are charged to do in regards to juveniles engaged with the justice system. So, so I want to open it up for sort of an open-ended conversation. There's no expected sort of closure point of things that we need to arrive at, but I would want to at least acknowledge the fact that this is we are at a new normal that I think we need to acknowledge that it is a new normal, and also sort of identify what is the significance of it in terms of what we do. I can share first from my perspective that I think there is I live in the education space, so I'm in schools. My work is around the over-disciplining of kids in schools. What I'm concerned about is the impact of what this pandemic has had in terms of the closures of the types of social service opportunities that are available for kiddos, right? So the absence of pools, the absence of camps, the absence of internships, what that creates in terms of limited set of outlets for our youth to have available to them. I worry about sort of what they're going to be left to be able to do when there's an absence of those things. So that's one thing that I'm, concerned about, and in particular, how is disproportionately affecting certain communities that have historically not had sufficient sets of opportunities available. So open it up. So if you want to chime in, raise your hand. We'll call on you. Joe.
One of the, I think, positive things coming out of this, and particularly related to my background, is the increased emphasis on the mental health aspect of all of this. And, in my prior life before retiring, we had developed curriculum for training CID officers who were officers focused on crisis intervention. And there had never been a curriculum focused specifically on juveniles, which we developed and then adapted for school resource officers. And it's now being used nationally through the NASRO, the National Association of School Resource Officers. And it was wonderful, but all it was a beginning. And I think part of when you hear a lot of the different issues that come through and the importance of having some sort of mental health experience or staff involved in some of these situations, and that may help to diffuse it. I remember when we started doing this, we had, it was a officer from Louisiana who we used to have talk, and he'd come in and talk about how he was trained to be John Wayne and come in and tell everybody to sit down and shut up. And that he found when he walked into houses where there were often a variety of issues going on, that all that did was pour more oil, gas on the fire. And that the most important thing was to be safe. And that what he learned was safe was not always being John Wayne, but being able to sit down and deal with some of the mental health issues. So I'm really glad to see that that's being emphasized a little bit more than it has in the past.
Hi, this is Alan. I kind of worry about the riots and the shootings that are going on and how it's going to affect our kids of color, seeing what's going on across the United States, especially with the recent news of the possible hangings in California. It seems like we're going backwards here. I wonder how our youth of color are taking this and how they're being affected by it, especially being isolated and not, being able to talk about it among their peers in the community, and what the outcome of that will be.
Good morning, Euphemia speaking. I hope everyone is well. It's good to see everyone.
Good morning, Euphemia.
I'm thankful for this conversation, and I'm thankful that people are providing their perspectives. There's something that came to my awareness that's not often discussed, but is often observed. And that's the post-traumatic stress disorder that occurs in the Black community, particularly with Black men, Black boys, with encounters with police officers. It's not talked about, but I had a discussion with some of my staff. And for those who've had encounters with the police, and unfortunately it's more often than not, when police approach them, they didn't realize it's trauma, but their instinct is to run because they're afraid that they're going to die. So there's a trauma that no one's talking about that's related to all that we're seeing in the media, all that people have experienced in their community that's not even shown in the media, that's not being addressed. And so often, because the young people or even the men are running, when they see the police, it's assumed that they're guilty of something, when the only thing that's really taking place is that fight or flight syndrome, and they're fleeing. And I think that these are things that should also be put in the mix when we have these discussions, because it's not being addressed. And also, you know, and it's very traumatic, and it's unfortunate because very early in the lives of young boys, Black boys, they're being accosted and even handled as if they're grown men and handcuffed. There was something that was circulating in social media this past weekend. The boy couldn't have been more than 11 or 12. 4 police officers are handling him. They're treating him like a man. And in one part of the video, they even have a plastic bag over his head. You know, and so these images that we're seeing, all of the deaths we're seeing, all of the deaths we're hearing about, known and unknown through media, these are things that are real and happening in the Black community, and they're not being addressed. You know, for so long, you know, it was perceived that this doesn't really happen. But thank goodness that phones have videos now, because now people are taking these videos and the whole world can see it. So let's not forget about the trauma and what we can do to address it, because, you know, technically it goes back to the historical trauma of the Black community, right? When the I'm going to call them the human trafficked, also known as slaves, were allegedly freed from slavery, there was no plan in place. Okay, you're free, but where do you go? What do you do? So now that we know these things are happening to the Black community and within the Black community, I think we need to start thinking about, where do they go? Where do we go? What do we do? How do we address it? But not just on one level, but on the multiple levels in which people's lives are affected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That reminds me of Ted Corbin, who's a professor at Drexel, is a emergency room doctor. His work, he focused on, he studies men of color, and he talks about sort of the difference that happens when men of color show up at emergency rooms and they've experienced being wounded by, you know, by a knife or a gun, and the response is the police, right? And versus individual who attempts suicide comes to the hospital or to emergency room, the resource that's brought to the table is a psychologist or a social worker. And what he studies is, so what's the nature of the absence of mental health supports that are also tied to those traumatic experiences of those types of violent acts that men of color experience, that becomes sort of almost a as Euphemia, as you kind of highlight, that you create sort of a reactionary sort of a pattern as a result of that prior experience. And there's never, there isn't necessarily a built-in process in some of our systems and some of the agencies that our youth interact with that are primed to address the trauma, but rather contend with the problem-based behavior. Emily.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I'm seeing a lot from the funder perspective. We did a survey of all of the organizations that we fund to see how they're faring, and it's really, really challenging. A lot of them have, didn't have the technology to transition to remote work right away. They had an influx of need, especially the legal services and reentry programs that we fund. I see a lot of stress on the staff of the youth serving agencies, the uncertainty before the PPP money was out. Would we get it? Would we do it? And now the PPP is ending, and what's going to happen then? And so very, very concerned about the staff, and then particularly around young people, it was mentioned about the, lack of summer youth employment, what are, young people going to do? But also a lot of the aid that's gone out, like, doesn't, like, undocumented students are excluded. We have to have, special funding sources for, to serve people who are not, who were not part of any kind of federal relief efforts that came out. We support a lot of the schools in the CUNY system, and the students are, already come from, I think that, 50% of the students have come from households that earn less than $20,000 a year already, don't have technology. So that's been really on my mind. With the courts closed and the some of the organizations that rely on earned revenue, like the legal services or the IALTA money and stuff, those I think are really at risk. So, and that all trickles down to the clients they serve, right? So it's the organizations themselves. And just to think that, like, child welfare workers were not seen as essential, who got to decide who the essential workers were and what kind of support and relief they got. So just those disparities and how they all trickle down, to people and communities. And of course, all the risks that have been brought up already that were endemic to those communities. I hope that, now there's a lot of confusion around the defund the police, language, all these hashtags, and the, organizations are getting flooded with money and then others are left behind. And so I think there's going to be a lot of work to be done in the shakeout of that. And I hope that there can be new narrative language around the redeployment of money that could go, from police into community. So that's kind of what I'm seeing from my side.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
First off, to start with, let's realize what COVID-19 has done in youth incarceration, right? For the past 50 years, we have been trying to reduce people. We're trying to help young people to not get into the system, and or for those that are in the system to get them out. And it's just crazy that in the last couple of weeks, the same work that we have done for 50 years, it has been done with this, right? So what can we do better, right? What we need to do in order to keep it going down. Then second, thank you, Emily, for talking about immigrant youth or people that don't have documents. Personally, that touches me because not until 6 years ago I finally was able to fix my documents. But it reminds me of now that I work with young people myself, and said, oh, we have this program before SYP got cut off. But do you have documents? Like, no. Oh, I'm sorry, cannot put you in. So maybe, even this with a strategic plan that maybe we need to figure it out. As we, as the last 2 years, we have been shifting from just funding trainings, funding other things. We have to also start maybe thinking about how can we shift at least some funding to directly young people. And we could include those that do not have a social security, right? The New York City Department of Probation has taken this initiative where we have looked our data, and there are 5 neighborhoods that are most affected, not just by COVID-19, but by the system overall. And they have come up with this virtual classes that if you take, you can earn at least $1,200, right? And that might not be a lot, but that is something, right? And maybe this is something that we can even as well fund, right? We can give it to direct organizations that can do this kind of program, because that I have heard, just New York City has the summer youth employment program, right? What about upstate? What about different states? So just to start thinking about that. Yeah, and just How can we keep this conversation forward, but not just keeping it, talking about it, but meaningfully, what are we going to do?
Yes, thank you, Michelle. And you're right. I heard about that program the other day as well, and it's amazing around sort of strategizing differently, in terms of our set of dollars, given the reality of what's happening. And so it's always sort of being preventive with kiddos who may not necessarily are justice involved, but even including youth who are justice involved, right? Who can sort of participate in those types of opportunities as well. Because they're also looking for that continued leverage so that they can still have a mobility, right? That they can get exposed to as well. And feel free to jump in because I realize I can't see everyone all at the same time. So.
Hey, it's Brendan here.
Oh, hey, Brendan, go ahead.
So I mean, just from my perspective, I mean, I think that, coming off of, well, still in the pandemic and now where we are with the defund policing movement, it will just be interesting, I think, to see how far we can move the police off the front lines of dealing with mental health and homelessness and substance use disorders and actually sustain that and actually, improve the world by doing that. I think it shouldn't have taken us watching the police murder George Floyd on video to be like, yes, we're finally going to change. It shouldn't have happened. We all know what's happening in communities before that, but of course it took folks to see that with their own eyes to finally wake up, and sustained protests for folks to change. I mean, we look right here in New York, nobody would repeal 50A until that happened. So, I mean, I think that if we can make some positives come out of this and some real reforms, both reforms on the police side, but also on, I think we got to hold our legislatures accountable as well. A lot of damage has been done by laws that have been passed that have criminalized things and put the police out to enforce laws that never should have been on the books, or at least shouldn't have been in the hands of law. They should be dealt with in the public health arena. So hopefully we can continue in that tenure, and hopefully that, as we move forward with juvenile justice work, that we'll be able to keep things more on a positive services end rather than on a negative end, and fall back into enforcement mode when things slip, especially when crime stats go up, that we don't fall back into that enforcement mode, that we continue to build on more of a services mode.
That's a great point. Thank you. I believe Tom said Judge Mendelson was speaking.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I had the wrong microphone on. Hello, everyone. It is a privilege to be sharing with you in this type of space. I just have some random thoughts to share with you. It is a season of complex and compounded pain, despair, sorrow, COVID, social justice, witnessing, horrific death. And we bring to our work who we are, and you see who I am. I've been a Black woman for many, many years, as a mother, a daughter, an aunt, a spouse, a parent, and I bring all of these various aspects of myself into every space, including the courtrooms I enter. And I'm currently a judicial policy leader in this most difficult, challenging, and I'm sick of the word unprecedented, but I don't have a better word for what we are all experiencing. But Michelle, being in any room with that wonderful young woman who I've been following for a very long time and learning from for a very long time, it's a privilege to be in this space with her, but she raised something that I've been thinking a lot about in this season, and that is opportunities out of crisis. and she's right, we did significantly reduce our juvenile justice system as a result of this crisis in a way that we've been working on. Our professionals have been working really, really hard in New York State and all over the country, quite frankly, in pockets of our country to reduce our justice populations using, strategic planning like we're doing in this group, as well as deliberate, actions and tests and experiments. And then we have a crisis of health, and suddenly we realize that we can safely reduce our population. So what can we use as an opportunity? One of the things I'm thinking a lot about is not just doing this now, as we may be seeing more arrests happening as things become better with our public health. How do we keep our charge is how do we keep our populations at these historic lows? How do we continue to reduce the disparities? I'm told New York is doing having some promising data showing us that we're finally able to address those disparities that so concern us and is the charge of this particular group as well. How do we hold on and use this crisis, recognize that all of us, the professionals, are in crisis and traumatized as well. If you didn't know what vicarious trauma was, everybody who is living and breathing is experiencing some sort of vicarious trauma in this season. So I'm looking forward to working in the helping field as a judicial policy leader and focusing on the opportunities and making sure we keep track of them and take advantage of them. The courts are not closed. I have to correct the word courts closed. We did not close for even a single day during this crisis. Our judges, our clerical leaders have been working 7 days a week, and our tech people have been working 24 hours a day so that the courts would not close. But we did significantly reduce and revitalize how we provided court services. We were limited for a while to only what was deemed essential and emergency. We have moved beyond that throughout the state, where we are conferencing cases, doing our work virtually, but still doing our very best to provide justice, particularly in the juvenile justice community. So thank you.
So, Eddie, may I add something?
Yeah.
Yeah, just building on the last couple of comments, a couple of things that we figured out, I think that we've known anecdotally, is that place matters. And so all of the data that we've collected on the pandemic has suggested that different communities have been impacted very, very differently. And by the way, those are the same communities that had the disparities in the juvenile justice system, in the health system, and certainly in my arena, the education system. And so as a state policymaker, one of the things that I think we're going to have to tackle is the policy that discourages targeting. And we're going to have to take that on, right? Because we know that there's a direct relationship between the quality of educational opportunities young people have and what happens to them going forward. And so, and we also know that in New York State, we have some of the best schools on the planet. Yet in specific communities, those opportunities don't exist. And so it's incumbent upon us to finally have the courage to take on the issue of what are we going to do differently in the communities of greatest risk. And what that essentially means is that there has to be a greater investment in those communities. And it seems to me that it has to be a comprehensive approach because, you know, as we all know, and there are enough mental health experts attending this meeting to confirm this, that all of the developmental pathways are inextricably connected. You know, they're not in isolation. And so that would beg the actual importance of having a comprehensive approach. So I actually think from a policy perspective, and particularly when others are saying that we're going to have to experience a time of declining dollars. And in that period of declining dollars, how do we take this on? And I don't see how we can take it on unless we're willing to take on the issue of target. So,
yeah, completely agreed. And around that sort of targeted place-based approach, you know, is that it's framed with a well-being focus, right? Knowing what are the set of factors that are critical for well-being, and not just a strategy that is premised on how do we just attack risk, but where's the work that focuses squarely on well-being?
Eddie, maybe if I could share a few thoughts.
Yes.
So probably like three different areas of thoughts. First, I think Judge Mendelson and Michelle and some others touched on this, but in both the juvenile system and the adult system, because of COVID, we've seen parts of the system shrink in ways that we have not seen before. And I think it's a great opportunity and a challenge, to see if we can keep things from just boomeranging back to where they were, and make this, think about what it is that we could do, to make some of these levels that we're seeing the new normal in terms of, detention, juvenile detention, juvenile placement, even adult jails, adult prison population, arrests. So I see that as a major opportunity for us. We've already started conversations with OCFS and others on the juvenile side around, what can we do to try and make this, the new baseline as opposed to where we were before. Second, of the many different things I worry about, is shootings. We've seen a lot of things go down. One of the things that we've seen go in the opposite direction are shootings. And it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is. There were signs, at least in New York and the cities that we're following, that they were starting to go up before COVID. And that's on the heels of 3 of the lowest years we've ever had since we've started keeping data going back to like 1970. And then since COVID hit, we've just seen massive spikes. And it's not just New York, it's, similar things being seen across the country. And then, Lester talked about this in the context of education. When you combine that with what's looming on the budget front, and you start to think about, are we going to cut funding for our street outreach programs? Are we going to cut funding for other things in the face of, cities and urban centers facing real significant spikes in shootings and murders? So I think that's a major concern. And for anybody in the criminal justice space, I think it's something that really needs to be focused on. And then the third thing I would put out there is, I'm going to talk about this in the context of what we're seeing around the defund police, Black Lives Matter, all the conversation now. But I think it unfortunately applies, so many other. It seems to apply all across our society today. And that is, at least from my perspective, it seems like there's far too many people looking at issues from the perspective of, I have to decide if I'm for this or if I'm for that. And there's no middle ground. It's, you either have to be all the way in one space or you have to be all the way in the other space. And I find that very frustrating, particularly in the context of the current conversation. I personally believe that when we look at policing, we need to acknowledge, things like, first of all, just the history of policing. And there's a very significant tie to racial issues and controlling segments of the population. And it's just, it's not that it's the fault of police now, but it's factual history. We need to acknowledge that and think about what impact that has and continues to have. And, when we think about either explicit bias or implicit bias or structural racism and how those things impact who gets stopped and people's perceptions of what police are doing when they get stopped and all the, we just have to think about those things. We can't pretend they don't exist. We can't ignore them. And then other issues, around lying, not telling the truth, covering things up, and we had reference to the videotapes. And if things, if it weren't for cell phone videos, would we even be here today? And I think all those things are things that we just absolutely need to be open to. We need to talk about. We need to acknowledge reality. We need to think about how we get better. And I think there's certain groups of people that put themselves in camps where you can't acknowledge that because I'm pro-police. So because I'm pro-police, I can't acknowledge that. Right? And then on the flip side, there's people, who are in other camps who, to the extreme, and I know defund police means a lot of different things, but to the extreme, you want to get rid of police and don't think about the fact that when 9/11 hit, it was police officers who rushed into harm's way, and many of them gave their lives to help other people. When the Pulse nightclub shooting hit, it was police officers who rushed in and, put their lives at risk, and Las Vegas and Sandy Hook, and you could go on. And so I just, for me, it's frustrating to watch people, put themselves, I'm all the way in this camp or I'm all the way in that camp. And I think collectively as a society, it's an opportunity if we could pull ourselves out of camps and just, be open to the reality, think critically about, how can we use this as an opportunity to improve policing, without acknowledging the positive. And I'm getting mixed up. I think you get the point that we need to be open to think about how we can move forward in a constructive way and acknowledge the harms, but at the same time acknowledge the good and not look at this as I have to be in this camp or I have to be in that camp. So a little bit of rambling, but I guess a frustration for me a little bit, but I also, I always look at times of trouble like this as times of opportunity as well. And I think Chief Cox mentioned it. It's sad that it takes some of these incidents to put us in a place where we might think about things differently and move forward. But now it's incumbent on all of us, I think, to really seize this moment, and try and push that movement forward. So I apologize, a lot of rambling, but a lot going on.
So, Mike, you bring up some very good points. But in one of those things that you mentioned is something that has been put on the table about getting rid of the police. So, with thinking ahead, if you get rid of police, what is it going to be replaced with? And the only thing I can see it being replaced with is military, right? So what's happening here? So these are really conversations because a lot of these suggestions that are being put forth are coming out of emotions. And when people act out of emotions, they're reacting, right? And oftentimes when we react, we don't make the best decisions. So before people, in my opinion, just want to be clear, people say, let's get rid of the police department because there's good and bad in everything. No matter what there is, it's always that opposite, good versus whatever is not good, right? So if people are saying on a certain level that we're getting rid of the police, well, let's ask what are your plan? What do you plan to replace it with? Because something needs to be in place to keep some type of structure, right? And for some groups of people to feel safe. So my question would be, okay, we're talking about this. This is on the table. What's the alternative? What are you planning to use to fill that space? Because I would be very concerned if the military is the answer. Because what that would mean in my thinking is that we would be under martial law. And then if you're under martial law, no one has rights. So I'm just saying.
I appreciate your point, Euphemia, in terms of your points regarding Mike's, because you're right, there is something to be said around, and in some ways gets back to Mike's point around there is the greatest analytical work needs to happen in the gray versus the black and white that some of these conversations are ending up. And it's harder work to do the analytical work in that gray space, but that's going to be the necessary areas that that we're going to need to be in. And I see, I'm so excited about sort of having the vast experiences that sit on this JAG to be able to really lend perspective on this as we, interestingly enough, move into this strategic planning process, right? As we're going to talk a little bit later, because I think in some ways, how do we leverage what we just discussed as part of our thinking forward around the strategic plan, that we do bring up some of these various points that you all are bringing up. Brendan's point around sort of what is it meant for having sort of police force being moved to do work that is in terms of doing mental health work that is just not the space that we've moved sort of that agency to. And diminishing sort of social service sort of funding and also strategic part of work that happens. I think there's so many different arenas that we could have potential of impacting and weighing in on as a JAG for New York. So I thank you all so much for sort of engaging in this roundtable conversation. And I'm looking forward to kind of doing this often as we have these JAG meetings to help inform the work that we do forward. We're going to move to the next item on our agenda, which are a couple of staff updates. I believe Jeff is going to start us off with the federal funding status update, and everyone should have gotten the two documents, if I remember correctly, that Tom sent out earlier in the week that has a overview around sort of our funding status.
Yes, thank you, Edward. Well, it says Edward on your screen name here, so I kind of took the cue. So we're trying to do this remotely. Might be a little bit of a challenge, and we're presenting off of two charts today instead of the usual one. It seemed that the situation with our Title II funding has gotten tortured because of all the litigation about the immigration-related conditions that the Department of Justice attached to the FY18 and 19 awards. But if you were to look at the chart, the one that we usually go over, which the header on the chart reads Juvenile Justice JJAG Funding Summary FY 2015 to 17, and it's got a blue bar at the top. That shows the grants that New York State has been awarded, not necessarily accepted, but has been awarded for the past 6 or 7 fiscal years. You can see it goes back to FY16. The last chart you saw went only through FY18 because when we met in March, we had just gotten back the decision from the courts pertaining to the FY18 grant. And as of today, the FY18 grant is not available to us. But what we have tried to do, the reason we've developed the second chart is because this chart, we couldn't figure out a way to make it work because, we have received the 16 and 17 grants. The 18 and 19 grants are on hold, but for FY20, we've already made an application to the feds, which is pending with DOJ. And in their solicitation, they gave no indication that they were going to be attaching the immigration-related conditions to the FY20 grant that they attached to the 18 and 19 grant, and which led to our not being in a position to accept that award. So we are moving forward with a cautious, it's an optimistic, but we understand at this point we have to plan around a scenario, and we think the most likely scenario is that when we receive that award, which will take place in August or September, and we see exactly what conditions are in it,
that we're optimistic that we'll be in a position to accept the FY20 award. So what that would effectively mean in terms of our funding is that the FY20 award period starts on October 1st of this year. So we need to make sure that the FY16 and 17 funds can get us to September 30th, and then the new award proceeds will become available to us on that date. And so below the black bar on that chart, you can see the commitments that we've made to date, and they're all listed here. And this chart doesn't factor in the timing of which commitments will be booked against which year's grants. But in the last couple of JJAG meetings, I think the members were talking about making additional commitments and they just couldn't see where the funding was going to come from. So we developed the second chart. And this chart, which says that the final name in the attachment was summary spending chart for JJAG. It's an all black and white chart. It says Title II funding summary detail at the top of the chart. You can see those are commitments again listed, and you can see the different grant years. And this changes continuously, but this is a snapshot in time. This is the way things currently are laying out. And the reason it changes continuously is grantee spending never comes in or rarely comes in exactly as planned. And yet we don't want to turn any of the funds back to the federal government. So DCGS staff will move which commitments are pointed against which year's grant and the different time periods, grant periods therein, to make sure that we maximize all the available funding. But as of today, you can see that what I described, we've got the prior year and then the 16 and 17 funding, and you can see what we're doing in terms of those current commitments. And that we have determined that we are in an ability, we will be able, with just a $38,000 total balance right now, to get through to September 30th with all of our planned activities. And then we have no plans for the 18 and 19 awards. And then you can see how the commitments go on for FY20. So if you look at the regional youth justice teams at the bottom of the chart, as you may know, we were able to cover the prior $150,000 per team initial 2-year award from prior year money. And right now we're on track in working with the teams to have the remaining $100,000 commitment that right now is on start with $50,000 becoming available to them this October 1st, and then plan on having that fully spent out sometime after the following October 1st. So you can see here, these are the total commitments to date against the available funding. It does presume that the Title II money starts to flow again with FY20, which becomes available this fall. And then, we do also have, at this point, we're making a presumption that the FY21 would also come in. The national amount appropriated by Congress for FY20 was just a tiny bit less than what was appropriated for FY19. So for projection purposes, we're assuming we'll get the total award amount will be the same going forward, and then we'll adjust that when we get if and when we get the actual numbers. So that's our attempt. If you look at the balances on the bottom line, of course, 18 and 19 are fully available. We still have, with this plan, a little more than $600,000 available from the FY20 award. So when you start seeing proposals later on this JJAG, and people are obviously going to wonder, where's that going to come from? It would come from that $602,000 balance on the chart. So, it is a very uncertain situation with the immigration conditions, and, we're watching the different cases unfold. But right now, it doesn't look like that court action is going to be resolved anytime soon. Certainly not before the election in the fall, which could change the policy on attaching the immigration conditions. So I'm going to stop there and see if folks have any questions or requests for. Okay. The immediate work is done here, Eddie, unless you have some questions or you want to follow up.
No, I want to make sure I'm trying to catch people. This thing keeps spinning. Everybody's picture keeps spinning. I just want to make sure.
I do have questions. I'm sorry to cut you off.
Michelle, yes.
So one, Jeff, so you just said that right now available, we only have $38,000 to utilize.
There's $38,000 of uncommitted funding from now until September 30th of this year. Then starting October 1st, we'll be into the next grant cycle, the FY20 grant cycle. So if we are in a position to accept that award on time, and they, which is we think is going to hinge around whether or not they attach those immigration-related conditions, then we'll accept that award, and we have an uncommitted balance right now of $602,000. But that's not until October 1st. So we have $38,000 in uncommitted funds from FY17 or earlier that we're gonna. It's like when you're driving in the car and it tells you have 18 miles to go until you're gonna run out of gas. You better find a gas station.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Thank you so much, Jeff, for kind of giving us this this update. I think whatever transpires over these next 6 months or so, I'm glad to see that at least for right now, we're not seeing those set of provisions attached to fiscal year 20 funding. And hopefully something gets resolved around 2018 and 2019 dollars, because those are pretty substantive set of dollars that when they become available, and I'm going to say when, not if, but when they come available, right? That signals sort of significant work that the JAG is going to have to be attentive to in terms of it aligns with sort of some of the commitments that I think we're looking at making, especially things that we're going to look at including as part of our strategic planning work. So thank you for the update.
You're very welcome.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
Emily. So around those dollars and so I guess maybe, I'm sorry if I don't totally understand what the lever would be to make that money available to us. Is that a lifting of restrictions, or Jeff, could you explain?
I don't know if Mike, he's an attorney, but Trump administration attached conditions about states' compliance with certain immigration laws. New York State and several other states refused to accept the conditions as a term of the award, and they joined and sued. And it started with the FY17 Burn JAG grant, which is a different grant that DCGS administers. And then in the FY18, they also attached it to the Title II. And so we have negotiated stipulations with the Department of Justice that they will hold the funds in abeyance basically while the court action tries to resolve. But if the presidential election results in a change of administration, it is expected that the Biden, a presumptive Biden administration would change the policy and remove those conditions from the prior year grants. And then we wouldn't have to wait for an outcome in the courts. Otherwise, we'll continue to sue in the courts. And that's the path we've been working at the same time.
All right, that's really helpful. I just know, because in Connecticut, the Connecticut disbanded the satellite. They basically pulled out because it just wasn't worth it anymore. The money was too small. There were too many restrictions, and we're seeing more and more state advisory groups just deciding it's not, coming, and so, I mean, hopefully, because we're still going, and we could potentially have like $4 million to spend. It's
then you'll have
stayed in the fight.
The problem we're more used to is making sure we spend the money before it lapses. That's the other historical challenge. So hopefully we're back in that quandary again. We're more used to that challenge.
Just to give it some more context, as Jeff said, this is also an issue on the Burn JAG front. And there it's 17, 18, and 19, and about $8 million a year. So there's $24 million on that side tied up, in addition to the $4 million a year.
Thank you. Yeah, but it's again, we got to stay in this fight. Because these are dollars again that can really be very targeted in terms of given what we just discussed. So I know our next agenda item is talking about the state ed liaison. Tom, you want to give us an update?
I think Shalane is going to do a very brief update on that. If she can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you. I am here. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to be giving a brief update on the state ed liaison that was funded through the JAG. So overall, just to kind of back up, so the goal of the position was to establish a professional school representation in juvenile justice activities and initiatives, increasing communication throughout the education system to enhance the chances for success for youth, and promoting a collaborative effort with the educational system as a vital component of a network in which youth are involved in. And so in, I believe it was November or December of 2018, SED successfully hired the liaison, and her name was Joanna Brierton. And so what Joanna was able to do was bring the educational perspective to tables such as the PYJ and the many work groups, as she also served as a member of the TAC and other committees and work groups such as the Trauma Champions Collaborative. She also was very instrumental in helping SED with their undertaking of restorative practices trainings, which occurred in summer of 2019, which is something that had been a focus in Western New York, specifically with the Western New York RYJT and under the leadership of Lori DiCarlo. And she's also been assisting programmatically with the Connecting Youth in Transition project, which we partner with at SED. Which is something that I oversee that works to connect youth that are transitioning from placement or have just been disconnected from their community and school system to kind of get them back going and get them back connected. So I think if I could sum up our biggest takeaways from having her in this particular position, I would say that there's a better understanding of the various offices in SED, such as the offices of student supports and how they play into various system points and areas in the juvenile justice system, such as reentry from placement and detention settings, and also mentoring as we became more involved in looking at how our work can sort of impact and be collaborative with the MBK initiative. We also got a better understanding of how to navigate effective collaboration with the various channels, especially related to funding that we have to go through to sort of get things done. And the other thing that I think we took away from, and this is my opinion, having worked closely with Joanna, is the importance of education being at the table in order to affect systems change. For example, we know that for girls of color, school pushout has emerged to be one of the largest drivers of system involvement. So in order to address that, we have to have the participation of educational system. And so Joanna had written us something, and I'll just use her words briefly to sort of describe and sort of sum up the experience for her. So in her words, she says, cross-agency relationships and collaboration help to ensure that when youth enter the juvenile justice system, they exit. Part of this process is to ensure that disconnected youth and or those in the juvenile justice system do not fall behind academically. SED can play a significant role in ensuring that guidance is given to schools and detention facilities, secure and non-secure, indicating that a student's education is a crucial part of their success in becoming productive members of society, and also helping avoid reentry and recidivism. Youth in the juvenile justice system should be getting appropriate credit for the schoolwork they are doing while detained, as well as given the tools, ability, and resources to achieve any necessary testing, such as the Regents exam. And so those are Joanna's words about what she took from being in that position as the liaison. And so in May, Joanna's position, unfortunately, discontinued by the state education department prematurely, despite our MOU indicating support for the position until September 30th. I know that there have there has been conversation now about what can be done to possibly fulfill the term that was agreed upon in the MOU, at least until September the 30th, but Tom can speak a little better to what is becoming of that or what has begun being discussed about that. So I'll just stop there as far as an update of where we're at with the SED liaison.
Thanks, Shalane. Yeah, I know that SED has been trying to work out some internal issues with respect to extending the position through September 30th. I don't have any additional information at this point as to whether that will be successful, but the MOU is still in place and available through September 30th of this year.
Thank you for the update, Shalane and Tom. Any questions? All right, so we're going to move to our next agenda item, the Youth Justice Institute. It's one of our major areas of goals work that we've done as a JAG, and Jesus here to kind of give us an update regarding some of the work that's been transpiring. We've gotten presentation from Jesus before, and I think it's going to provide a sort of further depth of understanding of what's transpiring. And then we're going to talk about sort of what are some of the areas of next steps. Jesus.
Thanks, Eddie. I'm going to give people a minute so we can pull up our slides, but I would like to start with a personal note, if you would allow me. I was extremely touched by the roundtable or Zoom roundtable discussion that you held earlier today. As a Latina woman, as an immigrant who's chosen to create and raise my family here, I had a very special idea of America in mind, and it's been a privilege to watch folks like you all who are in a position of leadership engaging seriously with the opportunities that are coming out of this crisis and recommitting yourselves to equity and shrinking the system. So thank you for that. Thank you for the opportunity to show off the wonderful things that we are doing at the YJI and to discuss with you what we envision to be the next steps for the Institute. When we were last together in March, on that Tuesday the 10th, it was still a time of handshakes and congregation in small spaces. Things changed very fast right after. By the end of that week, right around Thursday or Friday, we at the YJI had pivoted all of our activities to an online environment already. So I'd like to make space here to acknowledge the flexibility and the grit of the 15 students that we have on staff, our YJI scholars, who continue to deliver at high levels despite the radical change in their internship environment. I could not be prouder of them. This was the season of firsts for all of us, including virtual graduations. I'm sure some of you have experienced those in your families or as part of your job. And while some of our students did graduate, I'd like to point out that their experience at the YJI has been meaningful enough that most of them have recommitted to coming back in the fall, and a few of them are with us this summer and here today to join me in presenting some of the YJI highlights. So you'll be hearing from Alicia Gagnon, who's entering her 4th year as a PhD student at the School of Criminal Justice at the University at Albany, where of course we're located. You'll be hearing from Brian Rainey, who's entering his 2nd year as a PhD student at the School of Criminal Justice. And you'll be hearing also from Samaria Alpern, who's our newest YJI scholar, who's come to us from Brown University. Samaria, take it away.
Hi everyone, I'm Samaria, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what attracted me to the Youth Justice Institute and my experience here so far. So a little bit about me. I'm a senior at Brown University studying urban studies, and I'm passionate about prison abolition, community-based alternatives to incarceration, juvenile justice issues, and the intersection of the criminal justice system with other institutions, including housing, healthcare, and education. So over the winter, I contacted Dr. Lopez to learn more about her work and to ask for advice regarding a youth justice related project I was developing. And after learning more about the YJI, I really I saw the ways that the Institute was helping the topics I care about into practice through its dedication to determining what programs truly improve the well-being of young people, their families, and their communities with equity in mind, which is really important to me. And although I'm involved in a lot of activism and service on and off campus at Brown, I never had the opportunity to contribute directly to the policy sphere of justice reform. And for this reason, I was really drawn to the Youth Justice Institute. And I've been at the YJI for about a month now, and I've already learned so much, met dozens of inspiring people working in youth and criminal justice related fields, and had the opportunity to take on responsibilities that I know have furthered the YJI's mission. I've also been welcomed onto a team of amazing, dedicated people. Being a scholar at the YJI is a unique experience that feels more like a job than an internship because there's no busy work. Everything I've done so far has felt meaningful, and I've been able to see the impacts of my work. I cannot overstate how much I've enjoyed and valued my experience here at the YJI so far, and I hope to stay on board as long as possible. And I promise I wasn't put up to saying any of this. It's really the truth here.
All right, thanks, Amaria. You may also recall that during that March meeting, we were in the process of hiring an associate for technical assistance for the YJI. It's been a long journey, but it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Avery Irons to our team. She comes to us with a wealth of experience and has hit the ground running. So let me allow Avery to introduce herself to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Avery Irons, the Associate for Technical Assistance for the YDI. Thank you for having us today. It's been a pleasure to listen in on this conversation, and it's been a pleasure to join the YDI team. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and kind of condense maybe 17 years into 2 minutes. I was most recently a Senior Project Associate at the National Center for Youth Opportunity and Justice, formerly the National Center for Mental Health and Juvenile Justice, which I know people in this body are very familiar with. In that work, I was a part of a team that did national TA training on best practices for serving youth with behavioral health needs. And that looks like supporting schools as they built frameworks to connect young people to behavioral health services in the community or the school in lieu of justice involvement. And it also looked like helping early points in the system around the country to identify young people who are at risk for substance use needs and connect them to services as part of diversion programs. Before that, I had a long stint of New York focused work. I was the director of youth justice programs for the Children's Defense Fund New York and the associate director of the Juvenile Justice Project at the Correctional of New York. This was policy advocacy work around raise the age, community-based ATDs and ATIs, and funds for those programs, reducing racial and ethnic disparities in justice systems at all points, detention and placement facility closures, and also working on the conditions of confinement for vulnerable populations of youth, such as LGBTQ youth. That actual work took me to California for a few years, where I was the training director of the RISE program at the Los Angeles LGBT Center, where we were federally funded to work with Los Angeles County's child welfare system to develop best practices for supporting youth in LGBTQ youth and child welfare. So that was me and what I'm thrilled to be able to offer once again to New York State and its youth and families and our partners.
Thanks, Avery. So after Avery onboarded, and I have to say virtually, she actually never had a chance to occupy her real office. Our best plans to start an aggressive and ambitious TA agenda with primarily the RYJTs at that point were put on hold due to the pandemic. At least 2 of the regional teams, as you're fully aware, were right in the virus's epicenter. So doing TA at that moment with the plans that we had in mind was just not feasible or tone deaf, to put it best. So we needed to pivot quickly to where the needs were. And the needs, as we identified, were at that moment on the impact of COVID on everyone, including youth and those working with them. As has been raised here earlier, youth were not the face of the pandemic, but have been impacted indirectly through their education, opportunities for employment, the trauma that they've experienced with their parents, especially those who are sons and daughters of frontline workers, dealing with all of this, we thought we really needed to get together and provide an opportunity for a comprehensive and holistic conversation about all of this. So what we did is we organized a series of web-based panel discussions that explored three big questions. What were the current impacts of the pandemic on children, teens, and young adults? What were the long-lasting impacts of the pandemic? And thirdly, what were the innovative approaches that were emerging out of this and continue to go on through this present crisis that we might be able to sustain over time? All of the discussions that we held were overlaid by an equity lens, and we had a stellar roster of panelists and moderators, some of whom are here on Zoom today. Thanks very much to Eddie, to Greg. I don't know if Nina's with us, Judge Mendelson, and so on. You made for a very rich conversation. The forum, of course, culminated with a keynote presentation by Professor John Powell, who is the director of the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley, and a plenary session by Michael Ampierre, who is the director of the Center for Juvenile Justice Reform at Georgetown University. That could not have been more timely given, hello Nina, I see that you're saying hi, given what had been happening in Minneapolis shortly before we held our forum and the conversations since. Now, I can't stress this enough. This forum really put the name of the YJI on the map. It has significantly increased the visibility of the Institute on a national and an international level, which is exactly what we wanted. We had over 4,300 registrations across all of the panels over those 4 days. Hundreds of others have watched the forum on Facebook since. We had participants coming from all across the United States and the globe. Latin America, Asia, the United Kingdom, and Africa were all represented. The last panel was devoted to research and funding, and we secured the participation of senior staff at Ford Foundation, Tanya Koch, Annie Casey, Nate Bayless, and William T. Grant, Vivian Sang. And we could not have done this without the support of Diane Serpina from the Tau Foundation. She really facilitated this contact, and it was extremely helpful. We can talk a little bit more about that later, but what I wanted to convey to this group is that the success of this forum and the sheer amount of people that we were able to attract, I think is a testament to the emerging convening power of the YJI, and it's the direct result of the commitment and the passion of the team that you're meeting here today. These are the folks that put it together and delivered. 4 people for 4,000 registrations. It was incredible. So I'm going to ask Avery, Samaria, and Alicia to walk us through the content and the format of the forum very briefly, please.
Hi, this is Avery again. I'm going to just talk a little bit about the concept and the principles that guided our vision for the forum and those who we invited to speak and what we wanted to cover. Actually, one of the statements that best encapsulates our vision and goal for the forum was something that came out of one of the discussions in our homes panel. One of the scholars remarked, and I'm paraphrasing, children are not resilient, they're actually absorbent, and they need a community and supports to thrive. And so the gist of where this conversation went in the panel is that yes, children can recover from much, but their ability to do so is directly influenced and strengthened by the environments that surround them. And this, just describes so nicely what we had wanted to do, which was to think about the environments of youth in the justice system and have a holistic view of a young person's experiences during the pandemic through the lens of the impacts on their home environment, education, communities, justice systems, and out-of-home settings. So as Giza mentioned, this was the overarching questions, or we had 3 overarching questions that we asked all the panels to discuss. What are the current impacts, the foreseeable impacts, and what are the innovations that are emerging in response to this crisis? And as we selected people to kind of lead these conversations for us in the panels, we had 4 main goals. We wanted a diverse stakeholder group represented on each panel for practice, research, and advocacy, and the voice of those, inclusion of the voice of those with lived experience. So we were really fortunate and just thankful that we put the call out and people from around the country responded. We ended up with wonderful panels of youth development specialists and economists, restorative justice practitioners, service providers. We were able to have two jurists. We are thankful to our own Judge Mendelson and also to Judge Stephen Teskey at Clayton County, Georgia. So that was one of our first goals, that diversity of participation, to break down those silos of conversation. Then we wanted to have a national conversation, a conversation that would be helpful and instructive for those of us in New York, but would also really be able to involve the entire country and world as we strategize moving forward about how we can best support youth at this time. So we sought representation from urban and rural environments, many regions of the country. If we think about just even our researchers who participated, we had representatives from Penn State, University of Memphis, Cornell, California State University Northridge, University of Colorado, and our own SUNY Albany. A third guiding principle for us was that we wanted expertise that could speak to the three developmental stages of young people, so children, adolescents, and emerging adults, so that we could also think holistically and across barriers and silos about those experiences. And then finally, we wanted to make sure that we were finding people who were deeply embedded in regional and national networks, who had their ear to the ground, so to speak, so that they weren't just speaking from their own opinions, but could speak with greater support from their field and kind of the communal expertise of the folks that they work with to help guide the discussions and support the work that was happening around the country. We ended up with some conversations that we're very proud of and I think were very helpful to us and to the field. And I will turn it over to Samaria to highlight some of the things that emerged from those conversations.
Thanks, Avery. So yeah, there's so much that came out of the forum, and I'm just going to talk about a few of the many overarching themes that emerged across the week's conversations about supporting our youth in the pandemic era. So one of the forum's most important themes was centering youth and community voices. The panelists emphasized that we must actively and consistently amplify the voices of young people and their communities, ask them what they need, let their needs guide policy, and give them a seat at the decision-making table. Next, many of the panelists made the point that we need deep systemic change that positions undoing institutional racism as a key objective, both in our justice system and in the other systems that youth and emerging adults interact with. Relating to this, many panelists agreed that everyone doing justice-related work, such as policymakers, service providers, researchers, and funders, should hold themselves accountable for reducing racial disparities, which may require significantly reforming their practices. Next, the panelists stressed that we must take a multi-system approach that centralizes collaboration across institutions and with community members. Service providers need to communicate with one another to provide a full continuum of care to vulnerable youth. Also, researchers across different fields should strive to widely communicate findings and build partnerships with each other and with community members. And then last but not least, the panelists highlighted that healing-centered, non-punitive approaches to justice that center equity and cultural relevance are critical in this moment when so many youth are experiencing significant trauma. Restorative justice practices can help promote healing by elevating the voices of victims, offenders, and communities and repairing their relationships with each other. Service providers can promote healing by building positive relationships and earning the trust of the people they serve. Thank you.
Alicia, we can't hear you. Perhaps you're muted.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alicia Gagnon. Thank you, Samaria. It is important for us at the YJI that we regularly measure the impact of our work and gauge the satisfaction of our participants to resolve any issues and continually improve through both numeric and short answer questions. Our success in our virtual delivery is captured in one respondent's comments, which was, "Everything was done well. I wish every forum worked as well as this one." For this forum, we are still collecting survey responses and we would be happy to share the final results with you. But so far we have collected a reasonable number of responses, a little under 100, and some of the quantitative highlights are summarized in the graph on the screen here. On the whole, our participants found the panels informative and rated them as excellent or very good. Over 97% of respondents enjoyed the panel sessions. 98% of people found the panel sessions informative, and 90% of people indicated that the information from the panels would be useful for their work. This is borne out also in the short answer feedback as well, with one respondent saying, "Justice system sessions were particularly moving and full of innovations, strategies, and thoughtful insights of where we need to collectively focus on practice and policy reforms." I would say that these sessions for me were the most engaging with concrete action steps that could be taken. Notably, 77% of our respondents said that they would be interested in future YJI events and/or want to subscribe to our monthly On the Same Page publication. We also took this as an opportunity to gather information regarding areas for technical assistance and research areas of interest from our participants, many of which are in alignment with our next projects and have been discussed here at the JAG meeting. While we had participant feedback from around the world, we can also identify New York-specific respondents to hone in on the needs of our localities. We would also welcome suggestions and collaborations from the JJAG members. I want to note that this graph here is the definition of the responses as of Friday. We have since had a 66% increase when we recirculated the survey yesterday, so this is preliminary results you're seeing here. I'll pass it back to Gisa.
Thanks, Alicia. And the reason why we take this survey so seriously is that we really wanted to know if moving forward, these virtual environments were indeed conveying and achieving the goals that we had set out to achieve, as Avery enumerated earlier. But what do you do with that? I, at least, am one of those people that do not believe that convening should end with the convening. So we very strategically try to capitalize on the momentum that was created by the forum to continue this conversation moving forward. And we're already reaping some of the results. So let me highlight to you that Alicia's and Avery's expertise has generated a request by the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges for assistance in organizing their upcoming conference. The same is true of the American Politics Group, which is an international organization that was also impressed with the forum and has sought our guidance on how to put their conference together. I was invited to participate in a special project to develop a national 21st century research agenda to support child and family well-being. This project is co-sponsored by 3 foundations: Annie Casey Foundation, the Casey Family Programs, and WT Grant Foundation. I'll speak more about that at the next meeting, as this work will begin in July. We've provided some support to the sentencing project on one of their dashboards. We were invited by its editor to submit a paper to the Juvenile and Family Court Journal. There's been interest in using our videos from the forum as tools to start conversations and to train others. And we are working on making those more easily available. All of the sessions are readily available on our Facebook page. If you didn't have a chance to watch the forum live, I invite you to visit our webpage on Facebook and take advantage of it there. The Othering and Belonging Institute will be reposting the videos on their website, which will obviously increase our visibility further and will reaffirm our commitment to equity on a public stage. We're organizing an issue brief publication synthesizing the panels, a website dedicated to it, and possibly another forum in November. We're in the process of forming advisory work groups to continue this work, to develop toolkits, to seek grants for future work in this arena. And there is, I hope, potential for closer collaboration with the JJAG members and especially youth members if there is interest, so let us know. Finally, the Research and Funders panel generated very tangible research questions that we hope to position ourselves to pursue and to solidify the position of the Institute as an agenda setter in this area. All right, but not all that we did since March 10 was the forum. We have, of course, other achievements and ongoing activities that we would like to share with you, but I want to recommit all of us and remind you of the vision that we have for the Institute, because from here on, all of our report will be related to that vision. Our vision is to have the Institute become, and I think it is becoming, the premier resource for evidence-based policy and practice in youth justice nationally and beyond. by engaging in 5 strategic steps. Let's go through each of these steps very briefly here. Our strategy number 1 was to serve as an information hub for stakeholders. One step in that direction is a new and improved website. I had promised to have that done by the end of March, but unfortunately with the pandemic, the IT department of the university did not prioritize our website, of course, and understandably. So by the end of this month, we hope to have it done. It's much more user-friendly than the current one, and it makes the YJI's ranking of evidence-based programs much easier to navigate, and that's been my goal. We have a treasure of information on our website. It's really hard to find. We are now on the 7th issue of our monthly newsletter that has an ever-growing readership of now about 800 subscribers. The newsletters include a mix of research briefs and curation of youth justice news from all over the world. It's a very rich resource, and if you have not subscribed to it, this is my shameless plug. Please let us know and we'll hook you up. I'll pass it on to Brian.
Yeah, so the YJI has developed a more robust presence on social media. So each week, the YJI publishes a Did You Know post on all social media platforms, as well as other relevant information. The number of followers in each of these platforms grows daily, amplifying the presence and brand of the YJI well beyond just New York State. So since the forum was announced, the YJI has gained over 200 followers across all of these social media platforms, in addition to attracting nearly 1,000 unique profile views across these accounts. So the new website will support the creation and publication of dashboards to translate data findings and other relevant information to a lay audience in a way that is accessible, easy to consume, and interactive. So we want to show you an example of what can be done with this tool. So as we were doing news curation for our monthly newsletter, one of our scholars noticed that there were a lot of stories pertaining to COVID-19 and youth justice. She suggested that we make an interactive dashboard showing the kind of coverage COVID-19 and youth justice topics are getting at both the state and national levels. So when you hover over a state, say Texas, you can see how many COVID-19 and youth justice stories there have been since mid-February 2020. As you can see, there were 7 COVID-19 and youth justice stories from Texas between mid-February and when we last updated the dashboard, which was May 17th. If you want to get more details about those stories, you can just click on the state, and this will take you to a table that contains the publication name and the title of the news story for the state that you clicked on. If you hover over one of those news story titles, you'll be able to see the state, the URL for the story, and again, the news story title. And if you click on the bubble that pops up, the news story will be opened in your preferred browser, making it easier for people to access. There were also stories of national scope and are not associated with any one state in particular. So by clicking on the all gray image of the continental United States down there at the right-hand corner, you'll be able to see all those stories that were of national scope. And understandably, many have voiced interest in knowing about stories related to COVID-19 and detention specifically. So if you click on the green box on the right-hand side of the page, you'll be navigated to a very similar map. However, any stories that are not specifically about COVID-19 and detention have been filtered out. So dashboards can be a very useful way to translate information, and we look forward to partnering with the RYJTs, the agencies, and others to put our expertise to work in disseminating information in a friendly way. And I'll hand it back to Giza.
Thanks, Brian. I want to say that this dashboard is live, and if you're interested in exploring it further, let us know, and we'll send you the link. All right, moving on. The second strategy in our vision is to cultivate and continually support practitioners' commitment to evidence-based practices. So we're working on our repository of evidence-based programs to revamp it. And as I mentioned, to allow for better access. At some point, Joe Kokoza, I'm coming after you. I know that we had a very quick conversation in the hallway at Draper back in December about how we could approach the rating of the evidence-based programs on our website. And I'd be interested in your input further. All right, another item that we are and have been investing in heavily is the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Policy Academy. We've been developing a plan with the CJS staff to establish this policy academy, and we hope to share more in the future once those plans are finalized. I know I have a meeting coming up maybe this week with Trista to explore this and other items. The youth curriculum development and best practice guidelines for police and community partners. The Institute plans to work with national experts to develop a new youth development curriculum for police and community partners, and will subsequently develop best practice guidelines for implementing effective change. Now, more than ever, I think that this conversation is timely. Also in the works is the Bridges program, which we hope to launch this summer, and it will enable the creation of a new program designed to match advanced PhD students from the School of Criminal Justice and other departments at the University at Albany with providers in New York State and with providers in New York State agencies and localities to problem solve data and research needs in the area of youth justice. This program is set to take place until December 2020, and I've been in conversations with Greg and his team to assess their needs, and with research folks from OCFS to align our interests there. Implementation science is at the forefront of my professional experience and my interest in realizing it through the YJI in New York State. At least I do believe that this approach ensures that interventions live up to their potential, that it maximizes meaningful impact on target populations, and I also believe it promotes sustainability over time. So we really want to work with professionals in the state in applying implementation science as they roll out new programs and initiatives. I'll speak briefly about certificate programs. What we want to do here is launch something that's similar to the certificate programs that are currently offered by Georgetown Center for Juvenile Justice Reform. We want to develop 2 or 3 certificate programs within the University at Albany over the next few years. I can share with you a list of possible topics, but I have to say this list was put together before everything that we've been discussing, and I think while at least 2 or 3 of them are still top priority, there may be others that come to it. So comes to mind trauma and healing implementation science, youth justice leadership, engagement, mentoring, youth gangs, and I think that this can be informed by recent conversations and whatever develops over time from here on. Now, we're very, very excited to have Avery on board, as I mentioned earlier, and to really launch our technical assistance program. To do so, we've been developing a process for receiving requests from the RYJTs and other local organizations. This process will include gathering ideas from potential stakeholders about the types of TA that would be helpful to them, identify the method by which those requests should be made, and establish protocols for reviewing, prioritizing, and accepting requests. Since this is her job, I'm going to let Avery speak to it.
Yeah, thank you, Giza. I can be brief. We're eager to start our county regional work. I think there's an opportunity right now as localities kind of reopen or step into whatever the next normal is for their systems, that this is actually a good time to emphasize the availability of technical assistance and to create or concretize the local connections that localities have to the Youth Justice Institute. So we are eager to support their efforts and also to partner in terms of, just thinking about the sustainability of their efforts they implement and evaluate, and also how that relates to funding sustainability as we identify grant opportunities through federal or private funding opportunities that, we can only know about if we are doing the work on the ground with the counties. So I'm eager and excited and look forward to kind of our next reports on what we're doing with the localities.
Thanks, Avery. Switching gears now to the third strategy under our vision, and there are 5. We are committed to developing a prolific and ever-growing network of research expertise. You may remember that we already have 2 affiliated faculty that are part of the Institute, and I'm proactively going after other folks. So stay tuned for news on that. We're pivoting much of our work, I hope, as soon as it's safe to do so, to conducting and developing original research that will support the CJS, OCFS, and other partners, of course. So in the coming months, a process for soliciting requests for research projects will be developed, which will include criteria for prioritization and selection. An example of a potential project would be the evaluation of a homegrown program developed by some RYJT or by any other local partner, such as the Stepping Stones program by Berkshire Farms. Another thing that I think is a victory for the YJI that I cannot forget to mention here, and I am actually very proud to share, is that the YJI has been selected as the institutional home for the Rochester Youth Development Study, also known as RIDS, including its intergenerational component, RIGS, beginning this summer. In this capacity, the YJI will be the gatekeeper for the data that is associated with the study. And this study was initiated in 1986 to study the causes and consequences of delinquency and drug use in an urban sample of adolescents. If you're not familiar with the study, I'm happy to have a conversation offline afterwards. It's been one of the longest longitudinal studies done to assess delinquency over the life course. I have published off of it. I've been privileged to work with that team. There may be a lot of potential here for future funding, especially if we're able to couple ourselves and align our interests with those of the research staff at the 2 state agencies and the courts. Moving on, our 4th strategy has been to foster and sustain synergy among stakeholders and others. I think we talked at length about the COVID-19 and Youth Forum, so I'd like to highlight the Healing-Centered Engagement Retreat next. On March 19th and 20th, just a few days after that meeting, we were set to co-host a Healing-Centered Engagement Retreat with DCJS that was going to be held at the university. The retreat would have included approximately 100 participants over the course of 2 days, but of course, due to the pandemic concerns, the retreat was postponed and will now take place on a virtual environment, and the audience will likely be much, much larger. We are trying to reschedule the retreat for some time, maybe in July. Greg, I'm trying to find you here in this mosaic of faces. But Greg and I have been working very closely with the Flourish Agenda to set a date for that, and we want to do it soon, given the urgency of this conversation right now.
So another way that we're looking to foster and sustain synergy among stakeholders, we, starting on March 30th, 2020, the YJA launched a webinar series featuring cutting-edge research and experts whose work can benefit youth justice practitioners. Titled Lunch and Learn, the series is webcast each month at around lunchtime and lasts about 1 hour. Previous webinars featured discussions about educating incarcerated youth, emerging adulthood and justice issues, and peer influence and delinquency. Future webinars will focus on SOGI minority system involvement and homelessness, adverse childhood experiences, racial and ethnic disparities, gender responsiveness, and detention, among other topics. Continuing legal education credits and other continuing education accreditation are being pursued for future webinars. And much like the forum, these webinars have been a hit. On average, there have been about 150 registrants for each webinar, with an additional 300 asynchronous views on Facebook. And post-webinar surveys reflect positive experiences for those participating. In line with the YJI's commitment to making research findings available to a wider audience, YJI Scholars produced a podcast episode which will be part of a series. And for the first podcast episode, I had a conversation with Dr. Timothy McCuddy about bullying, cyberbullying, and issues surrounding the research of these phenomena. Dr. McCuddy is the project director of the University of Missouri St. Louis's Comprehensive School Safety Initiative, which is a longitudinal study on school safety funded by the National Institute of Justice. And the YGI podcast is currently available on 5 different listening platforms, including Spotify, and we can circulate the link if it's of interest to any of you.
Thanks, Brian. Before we move on to our very last strategic step here, I just want to reiterate that in collaboration with UCJS, the YJI has offered to help lead the facilitation and any other information gathering efforts for the next JJAG strategic plan. So let us know if we can be of service in any way. So last but not least, strategy number 5, to leverage current public investments to attract external funding that will enable the YJI to grow and move towards self-sustainability. We're blossoming, and it can't stop here. Now is where we think about how we keep this going for decades and gain some sense of financial independence from our primary funders. The first 10 months of my leadership, and I want to stress that I haven't reached my 1 year yet, we're really focused on building an identity and building credibility for the YJI, assembling our team, strengthening our presence at the university and with our partnering state agencies in New York and beyond. But I am acutely aware that the next phase of my work needs to move increasingly to seek self-sustainability. And to that end, we've already started. We have 2 grants under review, one with partners from the Global Youth Justice, Inc. and from the University of California at Riverside. We're seeking funding from Arnold Ventures to examine the outcomes of peer courts. If this does go through, it can be a substantial amount of funding to sustain, obviously, that research for the YJI, but that would allow us to present ourselves in other opportunities as credible deliverers, right? The second grant that we have applied for was with the Office of Court Administration. We sought funding from OJJDP to provide training to juvenile defense attorneys in New York State. We'll know in the fall whether the application was successful. And interestingly, we made an application totally based on delivering training online. This was right before, well, actually, well before this virtual environment had become our new normal. So we're hopeful that this will give us a leg up. I mentioned earlier that the last panel of the YJI's virtual forum on COVID and youth was intentionally designed to set the agenda for research moving forward and to attract perhaps the attention and align our priorities with those of funding agencies. So we continue to work in that direction. I also mentioned that we would like to leverage RIDS, the Rochester Youth Development Study, and leverage the partnerships that we've fostered during the forum. Now, more than ever, research is a collaborative endeavor. We want to seize that momentum. And we'll continue to pursue grants that align with the vision for the YJI, these strategies, and seek funding from other sources, such as philanthropic foundations. With that, I'd like to do 3 things next. I'd like to reiterate my thanks for your support for the YJI to date. I know it's been a journey. I'd like to invite you again to stay in touch between meetings and share your wealth of expertise with us. And I would like to pass the baton to Tom, who will talk about the MOU renewal and the proposal before you. Tom.
Thank you, Giza, and YJI staff. Excellent presentation. A lot of great work being done. JAG members, you have 2 documents that are relevant within the meeting notice and that you have received. One being a proposal for a one-year extension for $350,000, and the other being some additional details surrounding all the information that GISA and YJI folks have just presented. Just to sort of, before I turn it back over to Idi, very quickly, the reason why we're proposing a one-year extension at this point in time is because of all the uncertainty out there. I think Jeff alluded to the uncertainty surrounding the federal funding. We have the pandemic going on. We don't know what the federal administration will look like after November. And with all those factors in mind, I think the idea was to put forth a very short extension for this time around, so that we're in much better position to understand what's going on at this point, or a little bit earlier in the year next year. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Idi.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, GISA and YJI team, for sharing, where you all are at, the massive growth that you all have done in such a short time frame. It's as somebody who's been, sitting on the JAG for 10 years now, and I remember the initial sort of thinking around this, and the great conversations that transpired to really bring this to fruition, and to see this at its place now is great. And also the potential of what the JAG could continue in terms of supporting, in terms of moving this work forward, especially in times like this when the need for information and guidance is a great need across the country. There is, never have I seen so much thirst for information, period. And particularly information to just think differently around sort of how we do this, and really appreciate the YJI's sort of attention to becoming that information hub during this time. So I want to open it up for some discussions regarding the proposal that was put forth, and then we will, after our conversations, we'll move, we'll have our YJI partners. We'll say goodbye, and then we'll move to our our voting and our other items.
Hi, this is Michelle. I have a couple of questions. I don't know who they go to, so if you have the answer, please feel free to jump in. So one, if we do approve this proposal, where does the money come from? We only have $38,000. Two, in the achievements and next steps, it's clearly said that they have close to $700,000. Why are they asking for more money? Two, if hold on. So would that be, what would that money specifically do? Yes, we heard this presentation, which is amazing. I can finally see that they're going to be self-sustainable in a couple of months, maybe in a year, which is something that we were really, like, should we keep it or not? So the question is, what is the $354 that they're going to do differently if they already have $700,000? And if it's, are we giving more money because we just want to extend the year, the contract? If it's only about extending it, the contract for us to keep in contact with them, why can we not just extend a year without giving money?
So let me try to start with the first question, which was where would the funding come from? $1.7 million will not be spent until probably towards the, because that's the previous commitment that the JJAG has made. The 350 is what we estimate will be necessary to get the JJAG through June 30th of next year. So it would come out of the FY20 grant, where there was a balance on that grant of 600, a little bit more estimated balance of about 600,000, a little more. So that's the question of sort of the timing and where the money would come from for the balance. I don't think I'm the one for the other questions.
Thank you, Jeff, for answering that first question. I think in terms of the second question, Gisa, yes.
Thanks, Eddie. So I'd be happy to share a detailed budget of what this money would be covering, but much of the value added of the YJI comes from its staff, right? And the staff need to get paid. So a very big chunk of that budget is sustaining my position, the TA position, a couple of research assistant positions, as well as providing our fiscal ability to implement certificates, for example. They are not free, right? As well as implementing the Bridges program. Those students will be compensated. That's not free. So there are many of these initiatives here that come at a cost. And the money goes to tide us over until the next year and position ourselves to be in a credible space to pursue external funding that leverages the public investment that's just been made. Does that help you, Michelle?
But it's you still have $700,000 left, right? To me, we're talking about over $2 million, and I have made an apology to the executive committee, but at the end of the day, our job is to make sure that things get done. That is it, right? And I know you said that you have been with us for the last 10 months, and we have seen a completely big shift of a lot of things have been getting done, but still it's just $2 million. That's a lot of money.
Oh, absolutely, it is. Absolutely, it is. And it's $2 million over the course of, I believe this money was appropriated or began to be spent in 2016 or thereabouts. So let's put it in perspective here. It's not $2 million for 10 months. I think what I would like to do is to perhaps walk you through, and I don't know if this is of interest to other members as well, but to walk you through what this money would be spent on. I believe this was made available to you in advance, but if not, I apologize, Tom. Was the budget made available? Yes, Sam.
Can I chime in for 1 second? Sorry, I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, but we did get the material in advance, and I just wanted to, sort of respond also to what Michelle is saying, and just in general. I mean, first of all, I'm so impressed by what you guys have gotten done. I know that this project, we have been, we put our first money out, about 4 years ago, and this institute had a slow start. Things are, building something within an existing institution, finding the right person to lead it, and getting things going takes time. I know, the Tao Foundation was the first investor of the Youth Justice Institute in Connecticut at the University of New Haven. And just from the funder perspective to, we gave an initial grant to that center for 3 years. And then an additional 2 years, because I mean, it really takes 5 years or so to get an organization to a place where it builds its reputation and credibility and programming up to a place where it can get that kind of national recognition that you were talking about. And as an investor, as a funder, these things are not short term. They take a little bit of time. Now, I think it was kind of a slow start, but I'm so impressed by what's been done. since, we really got a leader at the helm. And I sat in on many of the sessions that you had at the forum, and I thought it was incredibly impressive. And so we're, I think, at the next level, and the different, you have faculty, you have PhD students, you have younger, I mean, one of your, students is just right out of college. I mean, this is the future of who's going to be setting policy and leading youth justice in this country in the future. And so I do understand the frustration that things, do take time. And at the same time, I think we want to make sure that we get the return on our investment, and that may, require funding at a certain level for the first, 5 years, which we're talking about coming into the 5th year. And then often what we've done at the foundation is then create sort of a step down where over the next period of few years, we give a low, smaller and smaller amounts of money over time as a center becomes able to become independent. And I think the examples where you've had, created inroads with funders, there are a lot of funders in the research space. There are some in the, youth justice space. And so I think you're off to a good start there. But I think for us as JAG members to see what has gotten done in this relatively short period of time, particularly since GISA has taken over, is I think we're starting to just really see the magnitude of what the return on investment here.
Thanks, Andy.
May I speak? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, Judge Mendelson and then Joe.
Zoom land. I didn't raise my hand, but I'm used to speaking, and everybody stopped speaking. So,
So let's have Judge Mendelson and then Joe.
I'm new to JJAG, and I'm also relatively new to the Youth Justice Institute. So I just wanted to provide some perspective that doesn't have the history that others may have. I have a PhD in criminal justice, so I am a secret a scholar. And so I come to this question of the youth justice issue from those spaces. When I tell you, I have attended thousands of conferences and presented at quite a few of them as well. I walk around with my handwritten notes from the sessions of your forum. And I have to say, it is the very best, and I'm not exaggerating, professional conference that I have attended and participated in my life. And anything this group can do to support this effort to not just have a one and done conference, but to have a movement, a space for additional research, a national and international leader focusing on youth justice, which is all that this entity wants to do. I really think that we need to support this because it's just too wonderful to not support. Thank you.
Joe. You're on mute, Joe. Joe, you're on mute. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, there you go.
Okay. First of all, I want to say I have been a big, huge fan of these kinds of institutes for a long time. Across the country, I've been very, very impressed with what they've done. And so very, very supportive of this. And in particular, after hearing the presentation today, it's even from just last March, how far you have come, what you have done, I think is incredibly impressive. My concern is less with what's going on now as much as it is in the future. And I'm not sure how far we should go without doing the strategic plan. And my concern is at this point, they're talking about for this current fiscal year, 700 plus 350, which is $1 million a year. If we would allocate $1 million a year for the next year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and I agree with what Emily said, these things take a while to get up. Then we're talking about half of our budget going to the Youth Institute. Again, I'm not necessarily against it, but I think it's a big issue that we need to discuss. Coming up with external funding, I did that for 25 years. It is not easy. It takes time to develop that. It takes time to get past, it's up to the kind of money we're talking about. Places like SAMHSA have always done 100%, then 50%, then 25% funding. I think we ought to continue doing this, but I think as part of the strategic plan, a major question is, do we want to devote half of our resources for how long a period for the Institute? If we do, then I think we need to make that commitment. But so my concern is more that long-term issue. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you, Joe. Giza, go ahead.
I just want to thank very much Emily and Judge Mendelson for the very kind praise to the forum and their insights, and also Joe and Michelle for their concerns of sustainability. And I want to share something with you. For 5 years, I worked as an assistant editor for what used to be the longest federally funded criminal justice project, which was the source book of criminal justice statistics. Some of you may have used it in your professional lives. And that project, as wonderful as it was, and having run for 40 years, died precisely because the leadership at that time did not have the vision to sustain it beyond the one source of funding. So I was a casualty of that. I subsequently tried to revive that project as part of the university's commitment. So I understand painfully and directly the need to have a plan for this. And I want to echo something that Joe said. It is difficult to do this, right? You apply for a grant and it takes usually between 6 to 9 months to even hear about it. So my request to this group is to keep in mind the timelines and, you know, to recommit perhaps with what the real goals of this institute was, and allow it to flourish from the investment that's being made by giving it enough time to prove itself. So with that, I hope I answered questions and allayed concerns, and
I know we have one more person. Sheila wants to chime in because I can't see Sheila. Sheila, are you on? Chat that you're on.
Yeah, Eddie, it's Mike. She emailed me and indicated she did want to speak.
Oh, okay.
Eddie, it's Martha from Syracuse.
Yes.
How are you?
Good.
I just want to say, I agree, just quickly, I agree with Emily's remarks. And I think when we initially talked about the Youth Institute, we knew it was going to take some time to develop a national reputation. And although it was initially a big investment, I think we all knew it would take some time and maybe some limited support over the years until it established itself. And I just want to say I was very impressed by the presentation, and it allayed any concerns that I had whatsoever. And I'm in full support of the funding that's proposed today.
Eddie, maybe if I could just make a couple of brief comments. So, first of all, I appreciate Michelle's comments about the amount of money that's been spent and the time. And, I think if you had asked Sheila and I back when, we were working with the JAG and others to get this started, we would not have envisioned that it would take this long. But the reality is, nothing in life ever seems to go exactly the way you plan it. And it seems that there's always bumps in the road. And I think a lot of what determines whether or not things like this succeed or not is how well you navigate those bumps. And I think, as everyone has acknowledged, and you can see from the presentations, we finally got to a point where collectively we've been able to work through some of the challenges we faced. We've got the right people in the right places. They're doing fantastic work. And while I share the long-term vision that, this is not something that the JAG continues to fund forever. I think without this, we run the risk that this body that's doing some incredible work for us at a really pivotal time in the youth justice field in New York will fall apart. And I think, this is what we need to get them to the next level. And I frankly think the Institute has earned our support. I think the work that they've done over the course of the last year and the results that they've put out, justify us making what I absolutely agree is a significant investment. At the risk of repeating myself, we're really at a pivotal point in time when it comes to youth justice. We've seen some great gains. We have some new low benchmarks that we'd love to figure out how to make a new normal. We've gotten every single youth out of an adult jail. That just happened a couple months ago. We finally hit the 0 mark. There's not a single 16 or 17-year-old left. With Raise the Age and with some of the changes that we've tried to make to the intake and adjustment process and resourcing that part of the system, there couldn't be a more pivotal time. And having the Youth Justice Institute as a viable, healthy partner, I think, is critical. So I hear and appreciate all the comments that are made, but I fully support the measure that's before the JAG right now, because I think it will really help drive the work forward.
Thank you, Mike. I'll make a quick comment. I think because I'm looking back at the grant summary that Jeff shared with us. One of the things that I've commented over the last 10 years is the JAG has really made a concerted effort to prioritize their dollars to have as close contact with the adults who work directly with youth that are justice involved. And as somebody who's a researcher, I'm always asking the question, it's a good thing that we are paying attention to sort of prioritizing dollars towards impacting the populations that are needing it the most. But we also have to make sure that we know of what we are funding. How do we know it's providing and doing what it's supposed to? What's the information that we're gathering so that we are leveraging for the next set of strategic work? And so I've always, reconciled that there has to be a level of investment that's also around, information gathering, sharing, and leveraging forward, as particularly, and I think as Jesus highlighted, as a JAG, how do we also leverage them in the set of information work that we're going to need moving forward, so as we make our own strategic set of decisions. So, and so, though it's, we may, I appreciate Michelle's comment around sort of the dollar specific to the Youth Justice Institute, but I also look at in terms of the totality of dollars that have been spent over the last 5 years across all the different set of initiatives that we have prioritized as a JAG. That this is a smaller percentage of, really putting forth, the importance of us having this sort of information hub. But I also agree with, the points made around that Joe made in terms of, thinking about sort of the model that SAMHSA has around how do you do sort of step down over time. And that will be obviously ongoing conversations with the YJI, in terms of their movement forward. So if there aren't any more comments.
Hi, this is Nina. Sheila's having trouble getting in, so she asked me to sort of relay her feelings and thoughts about the use of the JJAG funding and really, the exponential growth that we've seen and the role that the Institute is playing in making sure that the adults who are responsible for the local systems have the information and the support that they need to not only further the reforms, but really institutionalize them. Like, that was one of the fundamental things that this institute was created to do. And to pull the funding away at this point would really set us back. Right? State agencies, while we often want to be out in the field much more to be providing that technical assistance in a hands-on way, right? We have a limited ability to do so, certainly even technologically. So the space that the Youth Justice Institute inhabits around really providing the local targeted technical assistance and support is really critical to the institutionalization, and also to build new practitioners in New York who are interested in continuing and furthering the reforms. So the commissioner feels like this is not the time to pull back support.
Thank you. I appreciate you sharing, Nina, sharing Sheila's comments. So I'm trying to be mindful of time. There are a couple of JAG members that have to leave very shortly, and I want us to be able to move to a vote. But before we move to a vote, we need to say goodbye to our YJI partners so that we can. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
All right. All right. Thank you all. Thank you for the robust conversations. And I think actually, we want to continue that as we move forward further. So for our vote, I'm going to have to do a roll call, which I forgot to do at the beginning of the meeting to get everyone to vote. But first, I need to ask for a motion. A motion to yes.
A motion.
Thank you for yes. Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have our motion. I'm going to sort of do the roll call, read down everyone's name. We're voting yes, no, or abstain. All right. Lester Young.
Yes.
Mike Green.
Yes.
Cox. Emily Tao. Jason Williams.
Abstain.
Alan Riley. Edwina Mendelson.
Yes.
Precious Lugo.
Yes, sorry, I had to unmute.
Okay. Karen Richmond.
Yes.
Meredith Bat.
Yes.
Joe Kokosa. Michelle Diaz.
No.
Meredith Martha Walsh Hood.
Yes.
Naisha Hamilton.
Yes.
Euphemia Strange.
Strong. Yes.
Yes. Thank you for that correction. And Bob Macaron. I don't think Bob is on. No, right? Okay.
I think Bob is on vacation.
That's what I thought. Okay. And Sheila is not on either. All right.
Let me try to, am you hearing me now?
Yes. Is this you, Sheila?
Oh, finally, just in time. Yes. An emphatic yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The yes have it, approving this proposal for the one-year extension for the YJI and the funding. Next, we're going to move to our discussion around the strategic plan. You all received the various documents that we'll pull together for strategic plan work group. And want to briefly sort of walk you through what has been outlined in terms of our next set of steps. Sorry, I'm going back and forth to my iPad and my computer because for some reason my computer can't have both things on at the same time. We have, here we go, strategic plan. The strategic planning subcommittee met several weeks ago to start outlining the set of activities, the timeline and deliverables that we consider are relevant for us to do this endeavor of meeting our commitment to developing a 3-year strategic plan for the JAG. The document that's labeled JJAG Strategic provides an overview of this goal that we are needing to achieve as a JAG. This subcommittee outlined in the timeline and deliverables section sort of a broad overview of sort of some of the possible dates and set of deliverables that we are looking forward to achieving to arrive us at a place where we have a draft of a strategic plan that the JAG could vote on by the end of December or during our December meeting. We are, as you see in the timeline, we are planning to, after today's meeting, after the discussion regarding what we have outlined, the strategic planning work group is going to get back together to do some debriefing in terms of the feedback that we're looking forward to receiving from you all in terms of our strategic planning process. We anticipate the summer being a time of gathering a lot of information that is going to be relevant for the work group to be able to sort of begin identifying what are some of those set of main priorities, what are some of the sort of national set of core youth justice work that needs to transpire, what's the current landscape to raise the age, and so forth, and compile all this set of information into several sets of summary documents that we are wanting to utilize for our September JAG meeting. Without knowing exactly whether we will be in person or we will be virtual, we are anticipating creating some type of opportunity before or after our JAG meeting that's slated to happen on, Tom, if I remember correctly, it's on the 22nd is our next JAG meeting, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. The set of documents that are going to be collected over the course of the summer and the summaries that will be developed. And as was highlighted earlier, the YJI will provide some supports in also generating set of information for us. That set of information will be leveraged as the core set of work that we will use to help us identify our key priorities as a JAG. So we anticipate having doing some type of retreat on the 21st or the 23rd. Obviously, we will keep everybody sort of abreast to sort of what may be doable as a JAG in terms of how we may do this retreat. I'm hoping that there will be some level of in-person that we could do, because I don't know about you, but I am tired of being in a box all the time. And it would be useful to kind of for us all to actually be in the same room to have these discussions, especially the level of planning that we need to do for our next 3-year plan. Based on that retreat, we will leverage that set of identification of priorities to start developing the drafts of the strategic plan. The DCJS team will be of great support in, as you know, Joe was great in terms of mentioning, bringing up at our work group meeting, right? Who's going to be in charge of sort of writing all this stuff together, pulling it all together, and the DCJS staff as will be key to leveraging all that information together post our JAG retreat in September. Our hope and plan is that we have a draft that we can put forth to the JAG, the entire JAG, by the December meeting to have discussions and feedback regarding that draft, such that we can be at a place by the end of December to have a more finalized version of the strategic plan. What you'll also see in that same document is some of the set of main components or priority areas that have been included in the previous 3-year strategic plans. Pause there. Work group members, is there any additional things that I should have mentioned or missed out on in discussing that the timeline and deliverables?
That was good. No, Eddie, nice job.
How about in general, JAG members, reactions to this this timeline? Anything else that you think we should include as part of set of activities that happen? Emily.
No, I thought it was really, really well laid out. It's an ambitious plan, but I think it's really important. And I did want to say that, you know, just in relation to the last conversation that we just had about the Youth Justice Institute, I looked back at old stuff. I just consulted with Tom about what we paid people to facilitate our strategic planning in the past. And so there's $50,000 we're going to save for hiring, you know, an external consult. Like, we have this amazing resource, which we have, you know, gave birth to, and we're going to be able to take advantage of having, you know, an academic institution and the expertise and facilitation. So I think it's a, you know, that's a great perk.
Yeah. That's a great point, Emily. Be able to leverage, and we're excited about that. You know, we have an information hub readily available to us as a state to really sort of harness our strategic planning process. Other thoughts? All right. So we are in preparation for, obviously, the next JAG meeting. We will make sure that as a work group, we provide you all the set of information that's going to be necessary in a timely fashion that you can review leading up to the retreat meeting, either on September 21st or the 23rd. We will try to be as diligent about giving you enough lead time so that you can peruse all that information. As you see on that list, we are, as Emily said, we're ambitious in terms of the set of information that we think is critical for us to have in front of us to really sort of outline what is the next strategic direction that the JAG wants to take on, given the set of important priorities that are existing around the country. So the next steps will be—
Who's on that work group? It doesn't say on the document who's part of that group.
Oh, great question. So Brendan, Joe, Michelle,
we had Lester, maybe.
Lester, Bob, Judge Hood,
and Jason. Jason was on.
Yes. We had we wanted to make sure we had a great, since particularly our youth members, we wanted to leverage them in as much as possible. So, so we're excited to kind of have this sort of very diverse group working with us. So, any other questions regarding strategic planning process? No? All right. Tom, Greg, I don't know if are there any points regarding the DCJS, your office's involvement in terms of strategic planning you all wanted to bring up? Or?
No, just that, you know, we're still waiting to find out, obviously, whether there will be able to be an in-person conversation in September or not. If, you know, if we're not able to do that safely, it will be via WebEx again.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Yes, I will cross my fingers and I will do my happy dance to make sure we have some type of in-person. right. There aren't any more comments, feedback, things for good of the order. I'm gonna ask for permission to. Michelle, did you want that?
You know, as we were going over the strategic planning, and this is going back to what this meeting started with, the conversation about what's happening now, right? And there's a lot of conversation going about defund the police, right? To do what, right? To give the money back to the community. And maybe that will be something we're talking about amongst all of us, right? To say maybe if we can put some money aside that will be directly to the communities that we serve. I know that we need people to be trained to treat kids how they're supposed to be treated. We know that the funding that we give for research, it's good for the policies that we do, and all of this, right? But you know, we have to also hold ourselves accountable, and that is, you know, giving something. We have been doing it for a couple of years. You know, I think for an example would be the Youth Empowerment Academy, right? What young people have beneficiated from that, and you know, just to start thinking of that we have to also, us as a group, I know we have so little money, right? But that 25 cents, then let it be.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
No, I like this quote because originally our first staff was kind of going to back at all this developmental law. I think this is a really good time and kind of inspired to approve whatever we ask for. Well, they are, and I gotta tell you, they should.
Karen, were you commenting? Oh no, I guess she was accidentally muted herself. Thank you, Michelle, for that. As a reminder, you're right. You know, the ways in which we balance, you know, our set of dollars in terms of prioritizing, you know, how we are impacting the various systems that are in charge of the care of our youth, and as well as the manner in which we are, and particularly in this moment in time, also serving at the ways that help to directly affect our various youth who are engaging our various systems as well. And I think that's something, you're right, we should carry forward as we talk when we get to our strategic planning process and have further conversations.
Eddie, if I could, before we adjourn, I just want to thank all the JJAG members for the time and the energy and the viewpoints that they bring, and particularly thank you for running a great meeting and creating a space for everyone to express their views and perspectives. So appreciate it very much.
Thank you. This is going okay, this chair thing. I really appreciate you all and all your energy. So with that being said, we're going to adjourn. Again, September 22nd, our next retreat meeting, our next JAG meeting with the retreat before or after. Enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Like it was.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.